So, Halo, it's cool, right? I'm assuming that it is, solely based off of what I've been told over the past, 15 years of my existence. Because, believe it or not, Ripley, I've made that fucking joke before! I've never played Halo. Now the segue is all fucking ruined. Now I gotta fucking rewrite the video, re-record this fucking part. You see, I mentioned it in a previous video. I was a PlayStation boy growing up, but not by choice. No. It was due to the family that I grew up in. Because I shit you not, everybody I knew had a PlayStation 2. My family, my sister's families, my aunts and uncles. The only people I knew who had an Xbox were both my uncle on my mom's side, who only used it for Tiger Woods golf, true story, and my sister's dad's other kids had one, and I never played it because I never went there. No offense, Michael, just not my dad. No, you see, I grew up constantly playing the B-movie, which I am convinced is a form of torture used in North Korea. That's actually false, that statement was a blatant lie, but I would not be surprised whatsoever if it was true. Regardless, the way Master Chief and his thick companion Cortana were explained to me, it was almost like the Believe ad campaign for Halo 3, which I did grow up seeing. I'd hear story after story about this tin man who could single-handedly kick the ass of an entire platoon alongside his AI buddy. However, it took me buying the Master Chief Collection on PC 19 years after the game's initial release to finally start understanding why everybody liked this green fuck. Now, I had also bought the original on Xbox and even played the trial on PC, but for some reason, they just didn't completely vibe with me. I think I was too busy playing Saints Row or some dumb shit. But now I've officially played through the game on both easy and normal because I like my sanity. I get that Legendary is the true way to play the game, but at this point in my life, I'm totally fine with living a lie. The best way that I can articulate my experience with Halo is the best FPS story of 2001. It is up there for Game of the Year 2001, but so much good shit came out that year, man. Halo has the design philosophy of that time period which made games so enjoyable and replayable. It's a challenging game with a pick up and put down kind of playstyle. Video games really began to come into their own at this time. Titles like Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid 2, Deus Ex, System Shock, Final Fantasy 7 through 10, Earthbound, and Chrono Trigger were all released. And around this time, the whole Are Games Art discussion began to come up, which really shouldn't even be a discussion because the fucking answer is yes. Halo just released at the perfect time. It was a first-person shooter that was extremely innovative. Aspects of combat evolved like the lack of sprint and aim, as well as the inclusion of huge landscapes with space cars to drive around in, were really impressive. Without sprinting or aiming, your experience is totally reliant on your skill, and I obviously ended up dying. A lot, but I still had a blast. Halo had that grasp of a PC-like gaming experience that was exclusive to a console. As a matter of fact, Gearbox, famous for their Half-Life 1 expansions, Borderlands series, and their questionable CEO, ended up porting the game to PC, which is just fucking yeah, we'll touch more on that port later on. Games like Battlefront, who would get lots of credit for apparently popularizing big wide open fields and tons of vehicles, wouldn't release for another year, and even then that caliber of FPS gameplay was still trapped on PC for years, with their first console installment being released in 2005, leaving 4 years where Halo was the only game of its kind on console. But remember how I said that it was the best FPS story of 2001? That's because parts of this game have not stood up against the test of time. As a whole, Combat Evolved is still an extraordinary game to this day, and I recommend it to everyone, especially for only $10. However, there's just some shit that got on my nerves. Specifically, everyone's baby, the Warthog. Now this bad boy had tons of possibilities, especially for my initial D moments. But my personal issue is that it kind of, just slightly, controls like absolute garbage except for specific situations. The floaty nature of the car, the slow acceleration, and the ridiculous amount of times that it flips over even on the smallest jumps or turns. Look, just replay Halo 1's final run and just try not to be infuriated with the fire of 1,000 suns. In some cases, like in open field or in multiplayer, this whole wonky control scheme is pretty serviceable. Sure, the damn thing will flip, but it's fine. You're just hanging with your boys, sipping a beer? I don't know, I don't have fucking friends. Basically, in standard fun playthroughs with wide open areas, no stress, the absolute fucky nature of the Warthog is acceptable. But in a timed corridor with a shit ton of jumps and obstacles, I know I'm gonna have a bad time. Plus, there's no checkpoints during this final 5-minute run, And while 5 minutes ain't a lot of time, that shit gets really old really fast. You can be milliseconds from finishing this run when time runs out, and you just have to start from scratch, because fuck me, right? It's like one of those set pieces in Mirror's Edge or Uncharted 3 that really tries to be an epic finale, but just ends up being a pain in the ass that I dread on a second playthrough. Speaking of dreads, this release of Combat Evolved is actually the port of a remake. This game is actually Combat Evolved Anniversary, released in 2011 with remastered audio, visuals, and the ability to alternate between the new look and the old look with the press of a button all in real time. I look at Anniversary to the original CE, like I specifically look at Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden. Yeah, I love Persona, get over it. The time gap between P4 and Golden was 4 years. In that time, 16:9 took over the 4:3 aspect ratio, gameplay tweaks were made to make the game easier or just more enjoyable, characters were added, story sections were altered, graphics were changed, the whole 9 yards. Now, this doesn't inherently make Golden better than P4. It's more accessible, and for that reason alone, way more people will play it. But just because it's different and technically looks better, doesn't mean that it's automatically superior to the original. Believe me, ask a bunch of P4 fans, they will tell you their opinion on Golden. And the same thing applies to Halo CE and Anniversary. There's something about the look of the original Halo, both the place and the overall game, that gets, as the kids say, lost in the sauce of Anniversary. And this is coming from somebody who has nothing against remasters or remakes. But there's something about the stylized realism of the original game that's captivating still to this day. The dark corridors capture the initial disorientation of the first level in the Pillar of Autumn, and then they improve that fear that the Flood caused in the later levels. Anniversary is just too damn bright. All the aesthetic moodiness and the moments that I've been told are scary aren't anymore. I can see clearly now the lights are on. Plus, lots of the interior design now looks busy, to say the least. This remake was made back during the time where game developers thought that modern graphics meant overly realistic textures with just a lot of needless shit on screen. According to Halo fans, this was a real issue with the series that's now being rectified with Infinite. However, just looking at Anniversary as an individual title, it definitely falls into that too much needless shit avenue. However, when you're outside, roaming around Halo, that's when the graphics serve the game justice. Lots of lush greenery, beautiful skyboxes, improved water and terrain, just exquisite. So the new stuff is a mixed bag. That means that the original look is the way to go, right? Even the original graphics aren't all that great either. This is because all the later releases of Halo CE, including Anniversary, were based on the Gearbox PC port from 2003, which despite owning a copy, I've never played it. I solely own it for collection reasons. So apparently the PC port has issues with bump mapping, broken effects, and incorrect models. If you want a way more thorough rundown, then I highly suggest Late Night Gaming's video on the CE port and the Master Chief Collection in the card in the upper right hand corner of the video. In the end, neither of these looks are entirely accurate to what Halo is, but I'm still glad that we're able to choose between the two whenever we like. If we really ask ourselves if Combat Evolved still holds up to this day, then that's going to be the easiest question I've ever answered, and I went through the American education system. Most of the time, to answer the question, does it hold up, depends on the person. Unless there's a superior release or something. But especially with a title like Halo, there is a definite reason why people like playing these games, regardless of this game almost being as old as I am. Even if, for some miraculous reason, I had the absolute worst time playing this game. If I personally had the shittiest gaming experience of my entire life, I still could not, in good faith, plop my ass down at this desk and say that the game is bad. I think that Combat Evolved is one of those games where, while it may not gel with you personally, and some of the gameplay aspects have been done better in other games released afterwards, it still holds its place as one of the best games of the 2000s. I'm actually going to take some time before I even buy Halo 2 for myself. I legitimately want to drain all the enjoyment that I can from CE before I decide to move on to the sequel. Combat Evolved was meant to be a one-off game. What we now know as the first trilogy in one of the biggest gaming franchises to date was originally meant to be an open-world third-person shooter for Mac and PC. I can tell you that only 2 of those things ended up fucking happening. And after a shit ton of changes, including cut content, as well as the switch to being an Xbox exclusive, Halo sold, with no other better way to explain it, Halo sold a metric fuck ton of money, surprising everybody but Bungie most of all. So they did what any company would do and ordered a sequel, because, well, money. Also because so much was cut from Combat Evolved that the team wanted to not just use that stuff for a new game, but take the entirety of Halo 1 and triple everything. Rebuilding the game engine, changing the physics engine, pushing the original Xbox as far as it could go graphically, including the usage of real-time lighting, but then scrapping that shit halfway through development, and expanding on the story where CE was lacking. However, as Halo fans would know, by doing all of this at once, they also tripled development issues, including months of overtime, Alex Seropian, Bungie's co-founder, just dipping mid-development, even more cut content, as well as the infamous Halo 2 E3 demo that was completely fabricated. Boy, Halo 2 really was ahead of its time. I hope people know that I'm like fucking joking and not just shitting on game developers. This wasn't coming from a place of hubris or terrible management, but from uncontrollable and raw ambition. And as inspiring as that is, that doesn't mean that the development process was sunshine and rainbows all the time. Multiplayer designer Chris Carney summed it up best by simply saying, "It was the most brutal development effort we've gone through." So after what can only be explained as a fucking tsunami of issues, Halo 2 released on November 9th, 2004, and very quickly became the best-selling original Xbox game ever made, raking in well over 8 million copies sold. Blah blah blah, and kick that journalistic bullshit to the curb. What about the actual game? Show me the Carfax, damn it! As somebody who never had an Xbox growing up, going into Halo 2, all I knew was hearsay. I knew about the dual wielding, which was honestly the part of the game I hyped up the most in my mind, a narrative that's on paper, similar to Metal Gear Solid 2 and Empire, it being really pretty for an OG Xbox game, and Cortana begins her evolution of becoming more and more naked? That's gonna become a shit show as I keep playing these games. So while I knew how legendary of a game Halo 2 was, I still had pretty mid expectations, mostly based off of my experience with CE, which I replayed for the sake of this video. I expected a pretty fun, competent game that quickly gets fucking repetitive. If I can just be completely honest, I was pretty uncomfortable with making this video for a little while, because I was afraid I just didn't like Halo, and the first time I played Halo 2, I really didn't fucking like it. I got up to the mission where you kill the real heretic and I was just not feeling it, so I put my original Xbox copy on the shelf and I called it a fucking day. Luckily, I took some time off, came back, bought the PC release, which has nothing to do with this besides preferences, played through the game, and realized that Bungie ended up creating one of the best FPS games I've ever played, and by doing so, saved me from the comment section. Yeah, if you couldn't tell by the footage of me mentioning it literally 30 seconds ago, what do you have, goldfish brain? I am playing this through the Master Chief Collection on PC, which is a port of the Anniversary remake for the original Xbox One release. 2 Anniversary does the same thing as the first game, where you can switch in between the classic look as well as the new graphics. The new look isn't so convoluted and messy like the first Anniversary was, which is a huge plus. I still don't like how some of the visual design of the remakes juxtaposes with the original's look. Plus, Blur Studios cutscenes, while beautiful, look overly lit and really moist. It looks like a never-ending commercial for a game. I just think that there's a way to obtain this level of fidelity while still making it feel like it fits the rest of the game. This really isn't that big of a deal, it's just a small nitpick on my part. Thankfully, since this remake isn't based off of some shitty port, those original Xbox visuals still maintain their look. By far, my favorite improvement over Combat Evolved is this game's narrative. As much as its setting and tone was interesting, it did often feel like a pretty standard FPS from a story standpoint. Its setup was intriguing, and the twist revealing the Flood was still pretty great, but beyond that, the rest of the story was pretty surface level. From the opening seconds alone, Halo 2 cements itself as not just more evolved than its predecessor, but a big deal in its own right. Instead of immediately opening with Master Chief on another cool mission, 2 opens with the Supreme Commander of the Covenant, the main antagonist of the series so far, being labeled as a heretic for not managing to stop Master Chief from destroying Halo in the first game, which to the UNSC was just a doomsday device, but to the Covenant, it was sacred. It's a really simple idea on paper, but it actually ends up achieving multiple things at once. It fleshes out the Halo universe through setting and dialogue beyond what little we saw in the first game. It shows that there are consequences for what Chief did to the other side of the war. It shows the extent of how dangerous and zealot-like the Covenant are, and it sets up the dichotomy of our 2 protagonists. And all of this is from like a 10-minute prologue? But the best part is that 2's storytelling, as well as its pace, doesn't let up until that cliffhanger punches you in the gut. From the immediate invasion on Earth, to the revelation of another Halo, as well as the rest of the insane shit that this game does, Halo 2 has like an actually interesting story. It made politics and war palatable. What fucking timeline am I in? It's a story that gives you just enough to keep up with what's happening, whilst allowing you to focus on the conflict at hand, aka shoot big alien thing. It's quite possibly the perfect meld of narrative and lore, which is kind of important for a sci-fi game. The large cast of characters are easy to like, both due to their banter amongst each other, as well as the amazing talent providing their voices. Keith David, Kevin Michael Richardson, Jen Taylor, Stephen Downes, Robin Atkin Downes, no relation as far as I know, Ron fucking Perlman, and David Cross? Who the fuck was he in this game? If I missed somebody, then I'm sorry. There's just so many great people in this damn game. I just love this story so much. A game like this could have easily ruined a character like the Arbiter. He could have very well been someone who isn't like the other elites who refuses to kill humans, which makes the audience easier to sympathize with him, but no. Chief doesn't stop murdering the Covenant, and the same goes for the Arbiter and the UNSC, before and after they meet each other. Instead of taking the easy way out, 2 makes you acknowledge the fact that this is a war. All of that tripling everything energy that went into the narrative also bleeds into the gameplay, despite that being the best part of the first game. The Mad Lads somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they made it better. I can't really put my finger on exactly why, but revisiting Combat Evolved made me realize how okay the campaign really is. Don't get me wrong, it's a really good game, one that broke the mold of what a console shooter could be, but that doesn't change the fact that it's really boring to play after your initial run. The biggest issue with multiplayer games that also have a campaign is that it can often feel like somebody grabbed a map, added enemies, scripted explosions, a couple cutscenes, and called it a fucking day. While CE's campaign had way more work put into it than that, it still, in my eyes, didn't live up to the potential that it could have been. Now 2, through its superior story and improved gameplay, keeps a better balance of these aspects. As I mentioned in the story portion of this video, its pace is very non-stop, yet it still has some quiet sections to keep that same vibe that the series has established at this point. To be fair, Halo third acts can get pretty tiring, and this time around the issue isn't repetition or anything. The final missions in 2 are phenomenal to play through. My problem is that the game is pretty long in the tooth, clocking into about 8 or 9 hours. As an RPG fan, just reading that sentence in my script just hurts my blood. My blood? What the fuck? Honestly, the entire game is still fun at the end of the day, so this is a really moot point. Something that, while I mentioned in my video on CE, yet pretty much glossed over, is how the simplified gameplay forces you to adapt. This isn't Doom or any other shooter for that matter. You can't run into places shooting anywhere and everywhere expecting to hit something. 2 also trims a lot of the bullshit from CE. No battery on the flashlight, no timed warthog section, and no health bar, leaving only the rechargeable shield. It streamlines the gameplay to its core elements while maintaining and expanding on the soul of the original game. Unlike some other franchise that I know, I promise that that's the last time I plug my Fallout 4 video. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have no fucking clue what else to say. I just really like Halo 2. I guess the music is amazing. Obviously, everybody knows that by this point. Martin O'Donnell has served his country well by helping to create an entire generation of people who love video game music just as much as standard albums. I legitimately had to go digging around my square brain to come up with anything that I had to say in this video. Not because I had no material, as you guys seen, I have enough shit to ramble on about, so while my reviewing skills may be pretty subpar, if I got one person interested in Halo 2, then I've succeeded. But the problem is that this game is just so satisfying that I immediately go into caveman mode when I boot it up. It's an issue. So, my children of the corn, we now have 2 installments in the bag, leaving only a bajillion more to get through. And I have to admit, while it may be pretty immature to say this right now, after 2, I think that I'm a fan of Halo. From the moment that I installed the game, I knew that I wouldn't play anything else until I completed it. And after I saw that after credits scene, I immediately began playing it again with infinite ammo because Resident Evil has ruined me. I just can't wait until I get to come back to this and take a look at the next game in the series. Me and my friends started a gaming channel, Krusty Couch, on YouTube. You can watch, or don't. Your loss.
Goodbye, splatter of alien gore. Goodbye, strange indoor trees. Goodbye, deadly bunker, old friend. Goodbye, giant windmill thingy of unknown purpose. Goodbye, evil obelisk. Goodbye, place where I got sniped, blown up, ambushed, incinerated. Good times. Yeah.
Once you bid fond farewell to Halo 2, pre-order Halo 3 at GameStop. Power to the players. Rated M for mature.
The aftermath of Halo 2 is one that's extremely interesting to look back at now. Fans were pissed, to say the least, criticizing the inclusion of the Arbiter, the length, and especially the cliffhanger. Bungie was overly apologetic due to just how much ended up getting cut out of the game. Not to mention that the studio had lots of internal conflict. People didn't quite get along, the remaining co-founder, Jason Jones, went on sabbatical, and eventually Bungie decided to sign a deal with Microsoft to become an independent studio again, as long as they made 3 more games before severing themselves from the Halo IP. And so, after the launch of a new console and years of fans waiting with bated breath, Halo 3 eventually launched on September 25th, 2007. And I was most definitely playing Kung Fu Panda and Spider-Man 3 on my PS2. Most reviews of Halo 3 start off with a long recollection of their memories with this game, of playing multiplayer with their friends, of watching the fucking Believe ads for the first time. And if you couldn't tell, save for that last one, those are memories that I don't really share. Not only did I not get a 360 until 2012, I'm not a fan of online multiplayer. And even when I did get an Xbox, it took me up until becoming an adult and making these videos to even get into the series. So my only real experience with Halo 3 is playing the campaign as an adult. And boy oh boy, depending on who you ask, it's either the best part of the trilogy or it's the weakest link. For me, it's not really that cut and dry, and you'll eventually see what I mean when we get to the story. Also, it's raining out here, so I have a stuffy nose. I'm not sick though, not sick. I will say that it sounds like Mike Tyson just punched me square in my nose. Visually, as the first title to make that jump from the original Xbox to the 360, Bungie did a great job overall. The environments are all beautifully made, even ones that are supposed to be ugly, like Cortana. The game still looks amazing 16 years later. If I had to say just one thing though, it's the character models. Chief, Arbiter, and pretty much every alien in the game looks great, but the humans are just off. I honestly liked how they looked in Halo 2 a bit better. Here, they try to push them to the next step of realism, but they just kind of look like rubber. And then there's Cortana, who doesn't look bad by any means. Visually, her design isn't all that different from her look in 2, which I'm a pretty big fan of. The whiplash of her look from CE to 2 is not here anymore, thank God. She does look like she's wearing a skin-tight bodysuit this time around, which is a problem in and of itself, but then they also had the gall to add jiggle physics. I promise that this is solely for science. I legitimately couldn't believe that Bungie did this until I rewatched footage to confirm, and yes, Cortana's breasts move. I want a video game historian to track down the fucker who did all this work for a character model that only shows up on screen for less than 20 minutes. Make a fucking documentary about that guy. Despite what criticisms people may have for the story itself, I don't think anybody's going to argue with you that 3 is the best gameplay in the trilogy and possibly the series. The devs took what worked in the previous 2 games and doubled down on it while simultaneously cutting everything else. The assault rifle returns, and there's lots of new weapons added to the mix as well as new vehicles and items. items. My personal favorite addition is that turrets can now be detached, and because of that, I spent most of Halo 3 as a third-person game. This time around, the sandbox is so wide, the gameplay options so vast, that it's almost difficult to choose what to use. The levels this time around are so well designed that there's never really a dull moment, and that's mostly thanks to the set pieces. There's big moments like the Scarab fights, flying the Hornet for the first time, the Warthog run, or even smaller ones like going through the previous area after the flood crash lands on Earth, makes this game as fun and as memorable as it is. Levels feel visually distinct from one another, and their design feels a lot closer to what Combat Evolved went for. They're wide open, allowing the player to experiment while not feeling repetitive or annoying, except for a select few. There's only 2 levels in Halo 3 that just don't work for me. The first being the Crow's Nest. It's fine on a first playthrough, but after replaying this game 5+ times, it feels like your hand is being held as you play through the same series of hallways sent on fetch quests by the supporting cast. And the other one being the one and only Cortana. Fuck this level. It's the one I dread whenever I replay this game, and I have a laundry list as to why. It has at least 20 interruptions by both Cortana and the Gravemind, which didn't really bother me too much in the previous parts of the game, but man do they pile it on in this level. It also goes on for way too long. Part of that problem is that it's not designed particularly well. It's hard to understand where the fuck I'm going. I often had to rely on the waypoint the game gives you after you get stuck after a while. Not to mention that you have to backtrack through the entire level after you retrieve Cortana. It also throws very large waves of flood at you, so many that it's more infuriating than difficult. And finally, you don't come in contact with the Gravemind at all. You just get Cortana, destroy the core, and then leave. I promise that I like this game. The heavy artillery mixed with the constant cool action moments the Chief is thrown into, topped off with the shorter runtime, makes Halo 3 feel like a well-made espresso shot of what Bungie can do. And the story is less that. It takes place a couple weeks after the ending of Halo 2, and is mostly about the Chief defeating the Covenant and the Flood while trying to retrieve Cortana from the Gravemind. Pretty simple stuff overall, which makes sense for a story that was always meant to be what was cut from the ending of Halo 2. 3 is made up entirely of payoff from the setup of the previous 2 games. It feels great as the final piece of a trilogy, allowing the player to constantly have some sort of dopamine rush with constant callbacks and payoffs that feel satisfying. Moments like the Arbiter killing Truth, the final scene where Chief goes to sleep again, and Cortana and Chief reuniting, the discovery of another Halo, I could go on and on. However, this doesn't mean that there isn't entirely new stuff that I love. I already mentioned it earlier, but I will never forget the tonal shift that happens once the Flood crash lands on Earth. It's frankly, in my opinion, the only example of a truly well done reuse of a previous level in the series. That triumphant victory set to the main theme is then juxtaposed by complete silence and an overwhelming amount of flood, along with cries and screams of soldiers. It's not scary, but the vibes are fucking immaculate, man. All of these set pieces or emotional moments are once again backed by Marty O'Donnell's amazing OST, and damn does it do a fantastic fucking job of keeping me excited for the entire runtime. The new Flood theme has a very get the fuck out kind of feeling that's fitting for the latter half of the game. On the other hand, while the campaign is satisfying to play through, it's hard to look at as its own narrative. It's the third act of a long story, and it feels like it. The pace is absolutely non-stop from the moment the Chief wakes up. No slow exploration, no setup, just set piece after set piece. As much work as Bungie put into this game's story to make it feel complete, there's nothing too interesting going on here that sets it apart from previous games. It's a 6-hour climax sequence, and it feels almost as if Bungie added in certain moments like character deaths to simply raise the stakes. Of course, I'm specifically talking about Miranda Keyes and Sergeant Johnson. Their deaths feel like they're simply here to give this game a sense of finality. Of course, they're still emotional, I care about them, but it's more so that it feels like they were for shock value rather than feeling like a natural consequence. The Arbiter doesn't really play a big part in the story besides killing Truth. Despite being the Deuteragonist, if that's how you fucking pronounce it. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Despite being the Deuteragonist in Halo 2. The most he gets is that he randomly shows up during gameplay, and I only assume that that was done to have the co-op mode make sense. Saving Cortana is Chief's main goal in this entire game, and yet nothing happens when she's retrieved. Yes, it's nice to see her again, but the real repercussions of her being mentally tortured are just kind of ignored since the game is trying to wrap itself up. I've seen people say that this game is phoned in, And while I'd never go that far, there's too much passion put into this game for that to be the case, it does feel like Bungie had an obligation to make this game as a sort of apology for Halo 2, and that kind of bleeds into the game itself. The smaller on-screen presence of the Arbiter, the shorter story, the fan service, all of it feels like a sort of olive branch. Not to say that all these things are bad, but when looking at the campaign as a whole, Halo 3 lacks any sort of strong narrative to stand on its own. Yes, Chief has to finish the fight, and that's pretty much all it is. Ending a trilogy is hard, arguably harder than making a direct sequel. It has to simultaneously be a sequel to a sequel, while also making that entire journey feel worthwhile, on top of the most important task of all, being a good piece of art in its own right. If it calls back too much to the first film, then the sequel's the outlier, and so on and so forth. As a sequel, Bungie did a great job. Take it from a newer fan who's tried making this video on at least 5 different occasions, 3 is fun to play over and over and over again. It's the game I've played the most out of Bungie's original trilogy. While it's tedious in other mediums, in video games, a good formula being replicated is fine. It's still pretty unique and more open-ended when compared to other FPS games, and as a Halo title, its gameplay loop stands above the rest. So no, Halo 3 isn't secretly bad, and no, I'm not making this video from some sort of contrarian mindset. The fact is that I'm right here with the hardcore fans who love this game to pieces. But when looking at it as its own entry, it's got a bit of a Return of the Jedi problem. The reason it took me so long to even make this video is because 1, I had another stint of feeling insecure about my opinion on a Halo game, since it wasn't just glowing praise of the multiplayer like every other Halo 3 video. And 2, because I enjoyed 3 so much, I couldn't hold myself back. I ended up binging every mainline Halo game save for Reach, as well as played Infinite on launch day. And not only did that mentally wipe me out, but it also stressed me out on giving my opinion on Halo 3 even more. As a franchise, Halo 3 is the last quote-unquote traditional Halo game by Bungie. It's a milestone in video games, and now I'm gonna come on here and try to ruin the fun? I've legitimately spent almost 2 years avoiding talking about Halo 3. I've scrapped plenty of drafts, and even this most recent attempt, I've rewritten the opening at least 7 times, I kid you not. I kept shelving it, hoping that I'll finally be able to do it justice, only if I play this, or if I play it again, or maybe there's something I'm missing. Like, how do you start talking about a game that everybody knows and loves already? A game that's almost surpasses the series itself and has become a juggernaut of its own volition. My first thought was talk about the game's development, or the hype leading up to launch, like everybody else has. Like, it was fun doing that for the first 2 games, but Bungie's hardships during the development of Halo 3 has been talked about at length. Same with the Believe ads. It's not that there's no reason for it, everybody loves it. Both of those are interesting pieces of video game history, but it's history I frankly have no connection to, and more importantly, would only really be talking about them because other people before me have. And that's a part of what made this video so alienating. I saw the Halo 3 ads, but was too young for any of it to have any sort of emotional resonance. I have more of an emotional response to the fucking Mountain Dew commercials. Anyway. After Halo 3 finally released in 2007, the overarching story was done. The trilogy-long narrative that Bungie had set out to tell with both the Chief and the Arbiter's fight against the Covenant was all over. But Microsoft still wanted 2 more games before they would allow Bungie to become a solo studio again, completely separated from Halo. And for those who weren't alive or conscious at that point in time, after the release of 3, Halo hype was at an all-time high. You'd think the launch of 2 was a big deal, but Halo 3 very quickly became the reason to get a 360, and still is, to many people, including myself, one of the best games ever made. And I didn't even talk about the multiplayer. That's a whole bag of worms. Because of this, lots of tangential projects began to be greenlit. There was a real-time strategy game in development by a completely separate game studio, and of course there was a Halo movie in development that was originally supposed to be directed by Peter Jackson of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, as well as have a tie-in game experience of sorts titled Halo Chronicles. I'm telling you, it's so fucking vague. I don't even know what the fuck their plan was with this thing. Once Jackson's movie failed to secure funding, everything related to the project and Chronicles as well completely fell through. Now here Bungie were, right back at square one with only a year time limit left to get a Halo game out of the door. Gee, where have we heard this story before? So this very short 2-hour DLC concept that they had as a follow-up to Halo 3 eventually got expanded into an entirely separate game titled Halo 3 ODST, released on September 22nd, 2009. ODST is my personal favorite game in the franchise, or at least it's the game I'm the most fond of in concept. As much as I adored playing and replaying the Bungie trilogy and how each game was able to build upon the last, the formula for Halo campaigns was beginning to show some repetition by 3, and it was just obvious that something needed to change, and ODST offered just that. It's a side game that's set during the opening hours of 2, and focuses on an entirely new group of expendable, somewhat normal soldiers, and because of that, manages to have a wholly new angle on the universe while still feeling like classic Halo. It ends up feeling like the perfect juxtaposition to a franchise that was built off of the very idea of playing through a power fantasy. And ODST sort of takes that all away. You like John Halo? He ain't even mentioned in this game. The best you're gonna get is a cameo from Johnson at the very end, and that fucker was already dead by this point in the franchise, so it was less like an Easter egg and more of an emotional gut punch. ODST is about a group of orbital drop shock troopers who are sent into New Mombasa on a hush-hush infiltration mission that ends up going completely wrong, leaving the silent protagonist, the rookie, to have to piece together where his team went and what the fuck they're even doing here. I appreciate that ODST isn't about stopping New Mombasa from getting glassed or turning the tides of the war. It's about a group of soldiers who are just trying to make it through the night. And while the ODSTs are cool and they are still set up as these elite soldiers, just one hit from an elite's axe fucking carries one of their chests in, so it still comes off as a very big change from what we're used to. And little moments like Romeo not accepting help to get on his feet despite having a punctured lung, or the rookie trying to effectively bend the rifle back into place only to throw it onto the ground in frustration are great little character moments that help give each member a unique identity, as well as makes you realize how resilient and yet fragile these people are. I mean, just from the menu, you can tell that this isn't going to be like anything you've played before in this franchise. When I mentioned in one of the other videos, I'm not rewatching them for the love of God, when I mentioned in one of the other videos that the Master Chief Collection removing the menus completely changes the vibes of the games, this is exactly what I mean. The menu just dropping you straight into the game with your playable character sleeping on the job as your troop gets ready to jump immediately makes this group feel easily identifiable. I don't think the group has so much depth that they could have been included in another game or anything. I wouldn't say that Bungie is known for their incredible character writing. It can all be very cliche, just look at Dare and Buck's relationship throughout the game. However, I will say that the team does play to their strengths. And especially after completing 3 games with the same group of people, ODST does a very good job at immediately getting the player comfortable with experiencing something completely new, and that's backed up in the gameplay. While the city you explore as the rookie, New Mombasa, is from Halo 2, the entire catalyst for the story is even shown in that game, the city itself looks very different than it did in 2. But I appreciate that Bungie didn't feel restricted to having to maintain what came before, and adapted it to the story being told here. The New Mombasa in ODST is much more of a mega city. There's massive buildings segmented by impenetrable gates, an AI superintendent that controls the whole city, and the fucking craziest thing of all, free healthcare. Exploring the empty buildings riddled with corpses and graffiti babbling about the end times really makes all of the rookie sections of the game feel hopeless. You're very vulnerable in ODST. Health packs return, meaning that there's no regenerative health, making it all the more important that you don't blindly rush into firefights. Dual wielding was removed, although that seems to be a separate creative decision since it just never returns in any of the subsequent titles. That pisses me off so fucking much. But I do appreciate that detaching the turret is still here, lest I need to riot in the streets. Even something as inconsequential as changing the flashlight to night vision immediately conveys to the player what kind of game this is supposed to be. I actually found myself avoiding fights in ODST, something I never do in a Halo game, simply because I don't want to run out of ammo and be stuck with a plasma pistol. I hate the plasma pistol.
This shit is stupid.
Sure, the game still has some good old Halo fun, since half of the campaign are these flashback levels where you play as the other members of the team like Buck, Romeo, and Mickey, where the maps are always full of warthogs and rocket launchers, and those are good, mostly. I do dislike the zoo mission, where it's part of the game. I think those missions do something interesting where they do play a bit with that vulnerability while still offering the power fantasy at the same time, but those are often separated by very large chunks of exploration through New Mombasa, where playing like the Rookie feels much more like a survival game. Those sections are slower and quieter than you'd expect from a non-horror first-person shooter, and that's sort of what I love about them. I could not possibly give less of a fuck about war games. Man, FPS is about fighting the good fight are not up my alley at all. So ODST, a game that removes all of the big green guy and is, at this point, as close as Halo can possibly get to Call of Duty, does not seem like my thing whatsoever. But man, it's all in the execution. Also, I'm pretty sure that the soundtrack by Martin O'Donnell, Michael Salvatore, Stan Lepard, and C. Paul Johnson plays a very fucking big part in that as well. Marty O'Donnell has gone on record to say that he didn't want any of the old Halo themes to be an ODST at all, which is ballsy to do with the franchise, especially Halo, since its soundtracks are so damn good. But I do like it as a creative decision, as it allows ODST to carve out its own spot in the franchise. Man, all I have to do is let those opening notes of Deference for Darkness play, and you already know that it's fucking amazing. And while that track has become iconic alongside others like A Walk in the Woods or Never Forget, there's just so many good fucking tracks in ODST. Man, that jazz sound really sets us apart from almost anything that I've played, FPS or not. That piano and saxophone really come together to create this unique texture that is ODST. Without it, walking around the city would just be fine, if a bit boring. But with these long stretches of more intimate, methodical pieces, it allows the bigger, cinematic compositions that play during the action set pieces to feel all that more cathartic. I can feel the electric guitar in my taint. This balance of classic Halo and this more dreary tone that ODST has makes the happier ending all the more satisfying, since it feels like you've really just crawled your way out of hell. All of the soldiers survive, Buck and Dare get together, it's cool. She never shows up in another game ever again. I think my least favorite thing about this game is the 3 in the title, because what the fuck is that for, man? I get it when it was just a DLC. This is almost as long as Halo 3. At what point does the side game eclipse the predecessor? I do understand why the 3 was included to emphasize that this was a side game and not a new full-length entry, but even with that included, the opinions when this game came out are fucking ooh. It's really fun to look back at, not just the hype leading to the release date, but the post-launch first impressions of ODST and how varied the opinions are, to say it nicely. Like this Ars Technica article that calls the game underwhelming, or this Game Rant article from 2010 that calls it Halo's only failure. God, I hope that guy got to live through an alternate timeline where that statement is still true. And after reading these, I completely understand why Bungie left the 3 in, man, since a vast majority of the complaints were regarding that good old price to game length ratio. It's interesting how on the internet we've just collectively decided to have the same 5 arguments until the end of time. This is not to discredit these opinions. In America, people are allowed to be wrong. It's just really interesting that now the opposite is true, where everyone praises this game all the time, and anything negative is heresy. And I gotta be honest, I completely understand it this time. I have played ODST like 5 times front to back before making this video, partly because I was experiencing a ton of writer's block, go figure, but also ODST is just that good that I wasn't really bothered by revisiting it. I don't think ODST got the flowers it deserved at launch, and even now, with all these videos being made on it, it's sort of just marked as the slow Halo, and I don't think that that's fair. Everyone just plays Deference for Darkness. It's like, if you listen to the rest of the fucking OST, man, I think people often downplay how much effort went into making this feel less like another shooter, and more like an expansion of the Halo universe that's given the same level of care and attention as the previous games. And how Bungie ended up making something that's simultaneously complementary to the original trilogy and a completely standalone entry. Also, I love Virgil. He's adorable. I'm surprised there aren't a bunch of plushies of him fucking floating around. You think Microsoft would have cashed in on that by now? But with ODST done and out of the door, that left Bungie with only one last title to develop before they would leave their flagship franchise behind forever. And what they ended up creating is, to many, the best game to the series, but also the most polarizing entry so far. And I wouldn't expect anything less.
The countdown is on. In 10 days, G4 will be at the center of the Halo universe with 5.5 hours of live coverage. As gamers everywhere count down to the midnight release of Halo 3. And best of all, we're giving away special Halo 3 Xbox 360s all night long. Halo Nation, rise up. Halo 3 Countdown Live, Monday, September 24th, exclusively on G4.
Buy a mini fridge for college? Get a free ice tray. Or buy a PC for college? Get a free Xbox 360. Buy a Windows 7 PC, get a free Xbox 360. All you really need for college. Unlock the deal at windows.com/free-Xbox.
So, unsurprisingly, ODST sold well. Really well. Within 2 weeks, it had already sold 2.5 million copies. And despite a vocal group of fans and critics who weren't so impressed with Bungie's output, the game had a positive critical reception. While those numbers are nowhere near the last mainline title, Halo 3, it was yet another miracle considering the conditions that ODST was made under, since the entire reason that game only had 1 year of development time was because of Bungie's next game. Their final installment in their flagship franchise, Halo Reach, which released September 14th, 2010. Reach was announced at E3 2009, the same time that Recon was now renamed as ODST. So while one team at Bungie was crunching to get that out of the door, another team was already working on what I think is their biggest game yet. Yes, 3 was a huge deal, and it's undeniably the biggest Halo game ever in sales as well as just cultural significance, but this was something else. Reach may have been announced in 2009, but it's a game that was a long time coming. Even if you're like me and have never read The Fall of Reach, ever since Combat Evolved, the events of what happened on Reach have been evoked throughout the franchise like a cloud looming over the UNSC. And that darker tone could immediately be felt in the reveal trailer, with the visuals of a planet on fire, as all you could hear are the sounds of the UNSC going completely frantic, unsure of what to do. Reach is often touted by most fans as the best game in the franchise, and yet it's the one game I've held off on playing until I reached this point in the franchise, pun intended. Yes, I've played every other mainline entry except for Reach, and after playing it twice, once on 360 and another on PC, while I hesitate to call it the best Halo game, or even one of my favorites for reasons I'll expand on later, it's much better than I thought it was at first glance. During the opening hours, I mostly wrote it off as Call of Duty but Halo times 12, mainly because of some gameplay changes I'll get into, the cinematography, the lighting, even the cover art was really sort of off-putting. The art design this time around is a complete mixed bag for me. On one hand, it's impressive that this game is 15 years old and still holds up relatively well. Just the skyboxes alone amazed me running on an Xbox One X. It's insane to think that Reach was a later 360 game since it was released 5 years after the console's launch. And under no circumstances can I believe that this and Halo 3 were ever released on the same console. While on the other hand, and this may get controversial once I get to the 343 games, but I think the quote-unquote decline of Halo's art style from simplified and identifiable to a sort of muddy mess didn't start with 4 or even Anniversary. It actually began with Reach. The character models from Anniversary that just look wrong, like Captain Keyes, the UNSC soldiers, and the Chief, those all came from Reach. Granted, I did praise Bungie previously for being willing to adapt and change designs in order to fit the tone each individual installment calls for, and I still agree with that. But man, the Spartan armor and Covenant designs feel way too busy, the guns feel way too occupied with looking real and gritty. The brighter colors of previous games are muted and washed out with tones of yellows and browns, even more so than Halo 3. Even the first reveal of the Covenant content in the very first mission felt so sour, since all of the models and backgrounds fused into this mismatch of dull colors. It just didn't feel like Halo. If anything, it felt like any other first-person shooter on the console. However, once you allow yourself to take in the entire game, it's much easier to see what Bungie was going for. Because to me, Reach was meant to resemble a war movie. From the color grading to the handheld camera and the cinematics, which honestly make for some of the best cutscenes in the entire franchise. None of these changes are haphazard. When producer Peter Jackson and director Neil Blomkamp's Halo movie failed, Blomkamp decided to direct a trailer for Halo 3, using many of the props made for that fail filmed by Weta Studios, and was shot and edited in his distinct shaky cam style, with lots of frantic editing to different sorts of cameras that would become so identifiable in District 9, and is also prevalent in Reach. Both ODST and Reach had their own live-action trailers as well, and although they were made by different directors, still managed to maintain that gritty look and handheld cinematography. So Reach, the game, feels more like Bungie taking what could have been and translating that into a video game. So while I'm not too keen on the aesthetics of it, I can understand why Bungie decided to alter the way the story looks to fit this more dire story. It's like Saving Private Ryan, but for gamers. Reach is a prequel set right before combat evolved, and is centered on Noble Team, a squad of Spartans, including a new recruit and playable character, Noble 6. What is initially an investigation of strange happenings on the civilian planet of Reach quickly escalates into a full Covenant invasion. In a lot of ways, ODST paved the way for Reach. I was surprised when I realized that this tackles very similar themes just by being the exact opposite. Where ODST is a game about a bunch of soldiers who are scattered all over a city and have to slowly come together to narrowly escape, Reach is about a tight-knit group of Spartans who decide to stay and defend Reach and are slowly taken out one by one. Both games play on what has become expected from this franchise by centering on what it's like to be anybody else but the Master Chief during the Human Covenant War. Except where ODST focused on the vulnerability and paid it off with a somewhat lighthearted ending, besides New Mombasa being fucking glassed, Reach is sort of what would happen if all of those wins were removed. All the power, no fantasy. From the very opening of the game, Noble Team are constantly losing. Except in previous Halo games, there is always improvisation. It's the whole point of the game. If something goes wrong, the Chief and Cortana will usually figure out some sort of alternative. Hell, even in ODST, a game built around a mission gone wrong is all about the team eventually pulling through in the end. While in Reach, there is still that sense of improvisation, it's all about a team constantly being pushed into a corner and almost overwhelmed. And the entire game has this sense of foreboding atmosphere to it. And that's all because the music in Reach is so ominous. Parts of the soundtrack feel like it's intentionally harkening back to Combat Evolved's sort of ethereal ambience, but the key here is that there's not a lot of triumphant music to really balance it out. ODST was able to stand apart from the original trilogy by having both its slower segments backed by solemn jazz, as well as the classic Halo stuff that we expect, with the music to match. But in Reach, there's not a lot of action music. There's some. My favorite track is the one that plays when the Covenant pods land on the beach, but even in moments where you should be astonished, like when George and Six go to space and you get to pilot a ship for the first time in the franchise, you're not hearing the enchanting choir in the Halo theme, or even electric guitars and drums. Just these slow, ambient electronic tracks that makes the entire mission feel uncomfortable, like the game knows something that you don't. Which all culminates when the Savannah frigate is destroyed, leading George to sacrifice himself in order to complete the mission of destroying the Covenant corvette over Reach, making him the first death in the game. And you're just forced to watch as his sacrifice is immediately shown to have been in vain when an entire Covenant fleet arrives over Reach, as Noble 6 just falls towards the surface of Reach. It's an effective moment, as this is not really something that these games usually do. I criticized Halo 3 for its handling of legacy characters' deaths, since save for truth, they all felt a little bit forced, as if the game was winking at us that, yup, This is the final game, so we gotta raise the stakes somehow. Video games can, if done well, use death a lot more effectively than any other form of storytelling. I even think that they can elicit feelings beyond the scale of even a movie. Ironically, Reach handles the concept of death in a much more meaningful manner, with characters that were essentially made to be cannon fodder. I appreciate how spread out the deaths are to prevent them from losing their effectiveness, and how the team are given absolutely no time to mourn their lost comrades. The first time I saw Kat get shot by a random alien off screen, you could hear a pin drop in my room. And it's not lost on me that the very first task that you're given after Kat's death is to destroy the anti-air cannons, the very same mission that you did with her at the beginning of the game. It's a subtle way to make her absence from Noble Team all the more prevalent by not just relying on cutscenes, but using the very nature of being an interactive experience to its advantage. Something I'm not sure the rest of the game attempts to reach to its fullest potential. Again, pun intended. As a game, Reach is just more Halo, except with some notable additions. Spike grenades from Halo 3 were removed, there's a new assassination system for stealth takedowns, and the animations on those are always fun. Slight armor customization that's not too extensive, and some new weapons and a new elite variant. But that's not really what everyone remembers from this game. No, the biggest thing that Reach added was armor power-ups. Namely, the addition of Sprint. I've made it clear in previous videos, but I don't play Halo's multiplayer at all. So the whole advanced mobility conversation from this game forward is one I set out of entirely. However, in Reach's campaign, I can say that I wasn't very fond of this addition at all. Since it is a power-up, it has to reload instead of just always being available, which is annoying, and the more egregious problem, to make up for Sprint being a worthwhile power-up for both single-player and multiplayer, your overall walking speed has been lowered in Reach, pretty much rendering my age-old handheld turret method completely useless on any difficulty but easy, since you just end up as a sitting duck. And honestly, while the other power-ups are sort of useful, like the jetpack is just so much fun to fly around all over the place, there is no reason to keep them for very long, since you'll just be waddling the entire time, a stark difference from previous titles. The vehicle missions like the aforementioned space battle and the sequence where you fly a Hornet all over the crumbling city of New Alexandria were fun, and they offered a sense of scale that hadn't been seen in the franchise so far. Although I am disappointed that the best mission in the game, one of the best levels in Halo history, Exodus, wasn't doubled down on. Going into Reach, the only two images that I knew of were Noble Six's helmet in the dirt and this cutscene of Noble Six infiltrating New Alexandria and hopping over the railing. It was the coolest shit ever. And the mission delivers on it, focusing on them going through the city with the streets full of dead civilians. You're given a half-full health bar and a pistol, only to complete hallways full of grunts ready to kill you with grenades. Exploring a massive city that's still standing and full of life while being actively invaded by Covenant forces is exactly the sort of game I expected Reach to be, and yet that's only a small fraction of what the mission ends up being. The rest is fine, just not what I really wanted. I don't even like Reach's opening. Winter Contingency is just not a good introduction level. Usually with a Halo game, there's some sort of hook to keep you invested before you're tossed into the deep end of the pool. In CE, our ship is invaded, we escape and find refuge on this ancient alien structure, while also having to reunite with our captain. In Halo 2, the aliens we're fighting have a much more zealot-like goal than we were originally aware of. Also, they're knocking on Earth's door like a Jehovah's Witness. Halo 3, Cortana's gone, we gotta save her. Plus, they're invading Earth again! You get the point. Instead, Reach just sort of goes, yup, there's something fishy going on, and gives you a 15-minute level where you mostly just walk around for half of it, investigating different parts of a village before it's revealed that the Covenant are on Reach. And then the rest of the game is just driving around in a Jeep, which is fun, but it's just, you're just shooting shit, and it's not engaging. I get that the actual hook for Reach was shown before Winter Contingency, with this foreboding image that none of this will go the way that we expect it to, and the mission itself is going for this slower investigation that builds up to the Covenant's reveal. Plus, I do like the final section in the factory pretty well, even if it only lasts for a couple minutes tops. But all in all, it just doesn't feel like a great introduction on a first playthrough, and feels even slower when revisited, which goes goes for some of Reach's other missions, mainly those vehicle missions I mentioned. They go on for just a little bit too long in my opinion. That's not to say that all the levels in Reach are bad. Dr. Halsey's underground facility is beautiful. The different building interiors in New Alexandria all make it feel like a real city. The set pieces in the final mission, like escaping the scarabs on a mongoose, was so great, and the reuse of the Oni mission was fine. Revisiting a previous map under different conditions is a classic Halo staple at this point. But that's the thing. It just feels like more of what we expect, which is just a little disappointing for a game that's supposed to be doing something different from what we expect. I might be wrong about this, but you can almost sense that the team at Bungie are begging to make something new. That's not to question the amount of work and care that went into Reach. By God, I feel like every single video I've made it very clear that Bungie is an extremely hardworking studio, and the power-ups and gameplay alterations in Reach can be characterized as additions meant to excite longtime fans. Plus, there's also nods and fan things that they added, like the Chief cameo at the end, or Cortana's color being that combat evolved purple rather than the Halo 3 blue, or the expendable soldiers that help you throughout the game being named after Bungie employees, which is such a great nod. But as a game, story aside, Reach isn't really all that astonishing or even identifiable against the rest. I do think that it avoids some of the monotony that could be a problem in, say, like Combat Evolved, but as a whole package, I don't think that it comes close to any of those games. And not to whittle this down to just one thing, it's safe to say that most people remember this game for its ending. Despite my somewhat harsh words I just had for Reach, while the first half of the game is good, the final couple hours of it are just amazing. I do think that they're somewhat greater than the sum of their parts because at its core, it's just two, technically three, Horde mode missions back to back. Plus, June just fucking disappears. I don't even understand why he's a character, if I'm being honest. He's not that fun, I'm sorry. I don't like his character. What the fuck is he here for? But once Halsey gives Noble 6 the task of delivering Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn, it's pretty obvious that no one's making it out alive. It's been a pretty big point that these two spin-off games are not to use the main Halo themes. So when we hear Cortana's theme for the first time in 3 years, while it's initially exciting to us fans, it immediately gives off that same foreboding atmosphere that the rest of the game has, almost setting up Noble Team sacrifices as some sort of divine, predetermined moment. But that doesn't take away the gut punch I felt when Carter and Emil give their best and ultimately sacrifice themselves. Also, Noble 6 can make sure that Cortana gets to Captain Keyes safely. It is fan service, but damn it if it's not executed so well. Building up this team only to give them a suicide mission that is the direct reason that the rest of the games even happened is the sort of payoff that most writers can only dream of achieving. Man, Keyes offering for 6 to escape with them, only for his final line to be, I have the gun, is so damn good. That foreboding tone and the dread that this game builds up in your soul all leads to this line and 6's final stand against the Covenant, which, no matter how long you put up a fight, no matter what the internet says, it always ends with 6 being overpowered by elites before Reach gets glassed, ending the game in the exact way that it began. The finale of Halo Reach is anticlimactic in a good way. If there's a sort of through line between this and ODST, it's that not everyone can be the Master Chief. Noble Team's contribution to the story is over. And while the game could have very well ended on that sour note, I will always appreciate Halsey's final monologue and seeing a revived Reach at what is currently the farthest point in the Halo timeline, signifying that long after whatever sequels get made, Noble Team's final stand on Reach will always be remembered. And damn it, if that's not a good prequel, I don't know what is, man. Reach's ending was so against the grain of what people have come to expect from Halo and from video games that there's still fans searching up If You Can Somehow Survive and creating bullshit hoaxes and fan theories about it 15 years after the fact. And you know what? All the more power to those people. Even with my criticisms for it, I have to say that Bungie went out with a massive bang. A game that found a way to thematically and literally tie back to the very beginning of the franchise. Reach just completely leans into its nature as a non-numbered entry and finally lets the fans experience what is essentially the Alamo of the Halo universe. What the fuck is that line? Watching Reach's credits made me choke up. Not because all these characters we got attached to are dead, but because of the thank you note from Bungie at the very end as the Pillar of Autumn heads closer and closer to the ring from Combat Evolved. Not only does it work as an effective bridge from this game to CE, but it's a nice metaphor for the franchise. The Halo is going to continue on, but Bungie is going to be heading in their own direction, whatever that may be. And it's really upsetting that this beautiful note is just completely missing from the Master Chief Collection. Same with the note from Halo 3, and that makes me wonder if that's why the menus and credits are missing from that remaster, because Microsoft doesn't want to recognize and commemorate the developers who spent a decade building this universe. It sort of depresses me that when people talk about early Halo, they only really focus on the original trilogy, and ODST and Reach are just sort of tossed to the side, when in all actuality, they make Bungie's entire run with the franchise feel complete. Playing all these games back to back feels a bit like a dialogue, one that valued creative growth as well as appreciated the community that they'd fostered over 9 years of hard work. A community unlike any other franchise I'd ever seen. Except maybe Sonic, Reach was the first game I was cognizant of. It's not just having a vague memory of a commercial. I remember walking into Walmart and seeing those damn ads, not knowing what the hell this was. Where's John Halo? I wasn't there in 2010 to say goodbye, but that doesn't mean that this moment didn't hit me all the same. Making these videos, going through each game's development, listening to interviews, watching press and news coverage, unearthing random vlogs of fans at midnight premieres, that's been my favorite part of creating these Halo games. I mean, play the games is cool too, I guess, but even knowing that I completely suck ass at multiplayer, or without ever posting on a forum or making a machinima, I felt like I've become a part of a community. And it's just a shame that this is sort of an end of an era. And that's not preemptive shade towards the 343 titles, because I want to give those games their time in the sun. But there was a feeling of connection and unity that was sort of dying in all gaming spaces in lieu of convenience at the same time Bungie left Halo behind. And slowly but surely, it changed everything from the way that games were marketed to the way that they were even made. So where does that leave the franchise? Well, that's for us to find out together.
Welcome to Reach, Spartan. Prepare to mobilize for the new Honor the Code promotion from Mountain Dew. Enter for your chance to win Halo Reach prizes starting September 5th, 2010 at honorthecode.com. Rated mature.
Teabag your way to fitness with Master Chief.
Work those glutes, Marine. You've just pwned someone